The lower decks of Terminus Station smelled like rust and forgotten dreams. Tyler pushed his cleaning cart through corridors that nobody visited anymore, where the lights flickered on and off like dying stars. 3 years ago, this section had been beautiful, full of shops and gardens where diplomats from 100 worlds would walk and talk about peace. Then the war came right to their doorstep, and everything changed in a single terrible night. Now Tyler spent his days scrubbing blast marks off walls and sweeping up debris that nobody else wanted to deal with. The station administrators had written off these levels, but someone still needed to keep them from falling apart completely. That someone was always people like Tyler, the ones nobody noticed, the ones who kept the universe running while everyone else made the big decisions. He'd been working the lower decks for 8 months now, ever since he transferred to Terminus Station looking for a fresh start. Earth felt too small after his brother died in the war, and Tyler needed to be somewhere different, even if that somewhere was a damaged space station at the edge of civilized space. At least here, surrounded by aliens and refugees and the wreckage of conflict, his own pain didn't feel quite so heavy. The cart's wheel squeaked as he turned down corridor 14, a sound that echoed off the empty walls. Tyler had his headphones in, listening to old music from home, when he heard something that made him stop. He pulled out one earbud and listened. There it was again, faint and distant. Crying. At first, he thought maybe it was the station's damaged systems making weird noises. The environmental controls down here had never been properly fixed, and sometimes the air recyclers made sounds that could pass for voices if you were tired enough. But this was different. This sounded alive and scared and alone. Tyler left his cart and followed the sound deeper into the abandoned section. He climbed over a collapsed bulkhead and squeezed through a doorway that had been partially sealed. The crying grew louder. His heart pounded as he moved through what looked like it had once been a residential area. Doors hung off their hinges and personal belongings lay scattered everywhere, abandoned when the residents fled during the attack. The sound led him to a small room at the end of a dark hallway. The door was missing completely, and inside Tyler could see someone had tried to make a shelter. There were blankets piled in the corner, empty food containers, and a small heating unit that had long since stopped working. And there, wrapped in a piece of torn cloth, was a baby. Tyler had never seen a Vecchier before, but he recognized the species from the briefings all station workers received. 4 arms, crystalline skin that shifted colors based on emotion, and large eyes that seemed to take up half the face. This one was tiny, probably only a few weeks old, and those eyes were fixed on Tyler with an expression that broke something inside his chest. The baby's skin flickered between deep purple and sickly gray, and even without knowing anything about Vecchier biology, Tyler understood that meant she was dying. He knelt down slowly, not wanting to scare her, and reached out. The infant didn't pull away. Instead, one of her small hands wrapped around Tyler's finger, and he felt how cold she was, how weak her grip. Tyler looked around the room, searching for anyone else, but it was clear the baby had been alone for days. Maybe whoever left her here had planned to come back. Maybe they'd been caught by station security. Maybe they'd simply given up. The war had turned the Vecchier into pariahs. Their government had bet everything on the wrong alliance, and when they lost, the entire species paid the price. Now they were scattered across the galaxy, unwelcome everywhere, blamed for atrocities that most of them had never supported. Station regulations about Vecchier were clear and brutal. They weren't allowed on Terminus Station at all. Any Vecchier found aboard was to be immediately expelled, which was a polite way of saying executed, since there was nowhere for them to go. Even helping a Vecchier could get you fired and blacklisted from every station in the sector. Tyler sat there for a long moment, holding this tiny hand, thinking about regulations and consequences and all the very good reasons why he should walk away. He thought about his brother, who died believing he was fighting for something that mattered. He thought about all the speeches the diplomats gave about building a better future after the war. He thought about what kind of person walks away from a dying baby just because some regulation says her species doesn't deserve to live. Then Tyler took off his jacket, wrapped the infant carefully inside it, and stood up. Her weight against his chest felt impossibly light, like she was already halfway to becoming a ghost. He could feel her heart beating fast and irregular, could hear her breathing in small gasps. She needed help immediately, and he was the only person in the universe who knew she existed. Getting back to his quarters without being seen would be nearly impossible during the day shift, but Tyler had spent 8 months learning every camera blind spot and maintenance shaft on this station. He pressed the baby close and started moving. Tyler's quarters were barely large enough for one person, let alone a dying alien infant. He laid her gently on his bunk and stared at her, panic rising in his chest. What had he been thinking? He was a janitor, not a doctor. He knew how to fix broken air filters and scrub floors, not save lives. The baby's skin flickered weakly from purple to gray and back again, and her breathing sounded like paper tearing. He grabbed his tablet and started searching through the station's medical database, his fingers shaking so badly he kept mistyping. HFY Physiology, HFY Infant Care, HFY Nutritional Requirements. The information was there, buried in files that probably nobody had accessed in years, but it might as well have been written in an alien language. Crystalline-based biology, mineral compound nutrients, environmental temperature requirements between 90 and 105 degrees. His quarters were barely 70 degrees. Tyler cranked up his heating unit as high as it would go and wrapped the baby in every blanket he owned. He read that HFY infants needed a specific mixture of minerals, particularly something called silicate gel that helped their crystalline structures develop properly. Without it, their bodies essentially broke down from the inside. The database listed 3 stations in the sector that stocked it. Terminus wasn't one of them. He named her Kira, whispering it quietly as he worked, because she needed to be more than just a problem to solve. She needed to be real. Kira watched him with those enormous eyes, and Tyler wondered what she understood, if she knew how close to death she was, if she missed whoever had left her in that cold room. The first week was a nightmare. Tyler couldn't find silicate gel anywhere on the station, so he tried mixing alternatives based on chemical compositions he found in research papers. He ground up mineral supplements from the station's hydroponics bay and mixed them with water, trying to create something her body could process. Most attempts made Kira worse. She would convulse and cry, her skin flashing angry red, and Tyler would stay up all night holding her, terrified that this would be the mixture that finally killed her. He worked his regular shifts in a fog of exhaustion, jumping at every sound, convinced that someone would notice his bloodshot eyes and nervous behavior. His supervisor kept asking if he was feeling all right. Other janitors commented that he looked terrible. Tyler made excuses about insomnia and a bad cold, anything to avoid questions. Getting supplies was its own special kind of torture. Tyler had access to station requisition systems for cleaning supplies and basic maintenance gear, but anything medical or nutritional required authorization codes he didn't have. So he started stealing. Small things at first, items that wouldn't be missed immediately. Mineral supplements from the commissary. Thermal blankets from medical storage. A portable heating pad from a supply closet. He worked double shifts to cover his tracks, volunteering for jobs nobody else wanted. The more hours he logged, the more access he had to different sections of the station, the more opportunities to quietly pocket what Kira needed. Tyler became invisible through constant presence, just another tired worker shuffling through corridors with his cart and his supplies. But Kira wasn't getting better. She was dying slower, but still dying. The makeshift mineral solutions kept her alive but couldn't provide what her body actually needed. Her skin stayed dull gray most of the time now, and she barely moved. Tyler would come back from his shifts to find her lying exactly where he'd left her, those big eyes staring at nothing. On the 14th night, everything fell apart. Station security started investigating unusual resource consumption in the lower residential levels. Someone had noticed that supplies were disappearing from multiple storage areas, always in small amounts, always from different locations. They were looking for a smuggling operation or black market activity. Instead, they were going to find Tyler and a dying HFY baby. Tyler sat on his bunk with Kira in his arms, watching her breathe in shallow gasps, and realized he couldn't do this alone anymore. He tried. He'd worked himself to exhaustion and risked everything, and it wasn't enough. Kira needed real help, the kind that required medical knowledge and proper supplies and resources that Tyler simply didn't have. The smart thing would be to leave her somewhere she'd be found quickly, somewhere the security teams would discover her during their investigation. At least then her death would be fast instead of this slow fade. Station protocols were clear, but maybe if they just found her, someone would feel enough mercy to make it painless. Tyler held Kira closer and felt her tiny hand grip his finger weakly. He thought about the person who'd left her in that cold room, how they must have hoped someone would find her and help. How they trusted that somewhere in this station full of diplomats and peacekeepers and people who gave speeches about building a better galaxy, someone would choose compassion over regulations. He looked at his tablet, at the list of station personnel, and stopped on one name. His supervisor, a gruff old alien named Gorth who'd worked on Terminus for 20 years. Gorth had lost his entire family in the war. Everyone knew it. He never talked about them, but sometimes Tyler would catch him staring at the refugees who came through the station with this look of profound sadness. It was a terrible risk. Gorth was a by-the-book supervisor who wrote people up for being 5 minutes late. He'd probably report Tyler immediately. But Kira's breathing was getting worse, and Tyler was out of options and out of time. He wrapped her carefully in a blanket, making sure her face was covered, and headed toward the maintenance supervisor's office. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely press the door chime. This was it. The moment that would either save Kira's life or end both of theirs. Tyler heard Gortha's rough voice tell him to enter, and he stepped inside, pulling back the blanket to reveal the dying infant in his arms. The old alien's eyes went wide. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Gorth stood up slowly, walked to his door, and locked it from the inside. When he turned back around, his expression wasn't angry. It was something Tyler hadn't expected at all. It was understanding. Gorth stared at the baby in Tyler's arms for what felt like an eternity. His weathered face showed no emotion, and Tyler's heart hammered so hard he thought it might break through his ribs. This was the moment. This was where everything ended. He just handed Gorth all the evidence needed to have him arrested and Kira expelled into space. Then Gorth did something completely unexpected. He reached out with one massive hand and gently touched Kira's cheek. The baby's skin flickered weakly at the contact, a dim purple that faded almost immediately back to gray. How long? Gortha's voice was rough, like gravel grinding together. 14 days, Tyler whispered. I found her in the lower decks. She was alone. Gorth nodded slowly, still looking at Kira. She's dying. You can see it in the crystal degradation. Her body is breaking down. I know. I've tried everything. I've read every medical file I could access, mixed every combination of minerals I could find, but nothing works. She needs silicate gel and I can't get it anywhere on this station. Tyler's voice cracked. I don't know what else to do. The old supervisor walked to his desk and sat down heavily. For a moment, Tyler thought he was about to call security. Instead, Gorth pulled out a small device from his drawer, something Tyler had never seen before. It looked like a modified communicator, but the signal encryption was far beyond standard station equipment. There are 43 of us, Gorth said quietly. Janitors, cooks, maintenance workers, medical technicians. All people the station couldn't function without, and all people nobody pays attention to. We've been operating for almost 2 years now. Tyler's mind struggled to process what he was hearing. Operating what? Helping people the station wants to forget exist. Gorth tapped something on the device. The regulations changed after the war. Suddenly certain species weren't welcome anymore. The station started quietly removing them, families torn apart, children separated from parents. Most people looked the other way. But some of us couldn't. He glanced up at Tyler, and there was pain in those alien eyes that Tyler recognized. The same pain he saw in his own mirror every morning. I had 3 younglings, Gorth continued. They died when our colony was bombed. I wasn't there. I was working here, sending money home, thinking I was building a future for them. His hand clenched into a fist. After they died, I decided that if I couldn't save my own children, maybe I could save someone else's. Within the hour, Tyler's tiny quarters were crowded with beings from half a dozen species. There was Beth, a human nurse who worked in the station's medical bay during night shifts. She took one look at Kira and immediately started running scans with equipment Tyler didn't even know existed. A Siltari cook named Ven brought containers of compounds that shimmered like liquid light, explaining in broken English that his species had traded with Vecchia for generations and knew their dietary needs. A young Praxan mechanic called Dash began rewiring Tyler's environmental controls, muttering about temperature regulation and humidity levels. They moved with practiced efficiency, like they'd done this before. Because, Tyler realized, they had. Many times. We've hidden 17 families over the past year, Beth explained as she carefully fed Kira a mixture that Ven had prepared. The baby's skin immediately began to brighten, shifting from dull gray to a faint purple. Most we can only keep for a few weeks before we smuggle them onto outbound transports. But we've saved lives. Real lives. Tyler watched in amazement as color slowly returned to Kira's crystalline skin. Why didn't anyone tell me about this? Gorth smiled grimly. Because we don't recruit. We watch. We wait. We see who people really are when they think nobody's looking. He gestured at Kira. You found a baby everyone else walked past. You risked everything to save her. That told us what we needed to know. Over the next few days, Tyler learned how the network operated. They communicated through encrypted channels hidden in maintenance logs. They moved supplies through ventilation systems and forgotten corridors. They had contacts on cargo ships and passenger transports, people who would look the other way when unregistered passengers boarded. It was an underground railroad running through the veins of Terminus Station, invisible to everyone who mattered. Kira improved rapidly with proper care. Her skin brightened to a healthy violet color that shifted to pink when she was content. She started making small chirping sounds that Ven explained was normal for Vekir infants. She would grab Tyler's finger and hold on with surprising strength, all four of her tiny hands gripping like she was afraid he'd disappear. The network members took turns visiting, bringing supplies and checking on Kira's progress. Tyler met a former soldier from Earth named Roy who now worked in waste management. He'd lost his entire unit in the war and couldn't stomach the hatred directed at survivors from the losing side. There was a Threxian food service worker named Nina who smuggled extra nutrition packs from the diplomatic dining halls. An engineer called Pete who'd been quietly sabotaging the sensors that would detect unauthorized life signs in residential areas. They were all broken people, Tyler realized. Every single one of them carried scars from the war, losses they could never recover from. They'd all reached a point where following regulations meant abandoning the last pieces of their humanity, or whatever the equivalent was for their species. So they'd chosen something different. They'd chosen to be kind in a universe that punished kindness. But kindness had costs. Beth explained that they'd lost people. Workers who'd been caught and fired, blacklisted from ever working on another station. One Siltari cook had been arrested and sentenced to 3 years in detention for harboring a refugee family. They knew the risks. They did it anyway. Tyler spent his shifts working alongside people who knew his secret, and it felt like he could finally breathe. When he passed Roy in the corridors, they'd exchanged the briefest nod. When Beth came by to check on Kira's development, she'd leave medical supplies hidden in cleaning supply boxes. The network functioned through tiny acts of rebellion, each one small enough to escape notice but together creating something powerful. Kira thrived. Within 3 weeks, she'd grown noticeably, her crystalline skin shimmering with health. She learned to recognize Tyler's voice and would reach for him when he entered the room. Ven taught Tyler traditional Vekir lullabies, songs that sounded like wind chimes in a storm, and Kira would calm immediately when she heard them. For the first time since finding her, Tyler began to believe they might actually pull this off. They could keep Kira hidden until she was strong enough to travel, then smuggle her onto a transport heading to one of the outer colonies where regulations weren't enforced as strictly. She could have a life. She could grow up. Then everything changed. Station Commander Vrel announced a comprehensive security audit, beginning with the lower decks. The emergency message came through the network's encrypted channel at 3 in the morning. Tyler was half asleep with Kira nestled against his chest when his tablet buzzed with Gortha's alert. Security audit starting in 48 hours. Full biometric scans. Every residential quarter. Every storage area. Every forgotten corner of the station. Commander Vrel had apparently convinced the Galactic Council that the missing supplies indicated a serious security breach. He'd requested authorization to conduct a complete sweep of Terminus Station, the kind of inspection that left nowhere to hide. The kind that would find Kira within hours. Tyler sat up carefully, trying not to wake the sleeping infant. His hands trembled as he read through the details. They had 2 days. 2 days to figure out how to hide a Vekir baby from sensors that could detect a heartbeat through solid walls. The network met in a storage room deep in the maintenance level, the one place they knew wasn't monitored. 19 people crammed into a space meant for equipment, all speaking in hushed, desperate voices. Beth had accessed the audit protocols and the news was worse than they'd feared. The scans would detect any biological signatures that didn't match registered station personnel. Even if they hid Kira in the ventilation systems or behind lead shielding, the sensors would find her. "We need to get her off the station," Roy said flatly. "It's the only way." "There's a civilian transport leaving in 36 hours, Pete added. "Heading to the outer colonies. I know someone in cargo who owes me a favor." Gorth shook his head. "Vrel has already locked down all departures during the audit. Nothing leaves until the sweep is complete. He's not taking chances." The room fell silent. Tyler looked down at Kira, who was awake now, her large eyes watching the gathered faces with curiosity. Her skin shimmered a contented pink. She had no idea that the universe was closing in around her. "Then we create a distraction," Dash said suddenly. The young Praxan mechanic leaned forward, his multiple limbs gesturing excitedly. "We can't hide her from the sensors, but we can make the sensors see so many biological signatures that they can't process them all. Flood the system with false readings." Beth frowned. "That would require accessing the main security grid. The protocols are heavily encrypted." "I can do it," Dash insisted. "I've been mapping the security network for months. I can generate thermal signatures, bio readings, everything the sensors look for. We make it look like there are 1,000 unauthorized life forms on the station. They won't know what's real and what's false. That's sabotage, Nina said quietly. They'll arrest everyone involved. They're going to find us anyway, Roy pointed out. At least this way we buy time. The plan came together quickly, born from desperation and the knowledge that they had nothing left to lose. Dash would hack the security network and flood it with false readings at the moment the audit began. During the chaos, Tyler would move Kira through the maintenance shafts toward the docking bay where the civilian transport was being held. Pete would work on his cargo contact, trying to convince them to smuggle Kira aboard regardless of the lockdown. If they could just get her on that ship, even hidden in a cargo container, she'd have a chance. The next 36 hours passed in a blur of preparation. Tyler barely slept, too focused on memorizing the route through the maintenance system, practicing moving quickly while carrying Kira. Beth prepared emergency medical supplies in case something went wrong. Ven packed nutrition compounds that would keep Kira healthy for weeks. Each member of the network contributed something, knowing this might be the last time they worked together. When the audit began, Tyler was already moving. He had Kira wrapped against his chest in a carrier that Beth had modified to muffle her biosignature. The maintenance shafts were narrow and dark, forcing Tyler to crawl through sections barely wide enough for his shoulders. Behind him, he could hear alarms blaring as Dash's hack took effect. Security channels exploded with confusion as sensors detected impossible biological readings throughout the station. Tyler made it 3 levels down before he heard boots pounding in the corridors. Security teams were flooding the lower decks, trying to make sense of the chaos. He pressed himself into a narrow junction, holding his breath, feeling Kira's small heartbeat against his chest. Guards ran past his hiding spot, shouting coordinates and demanding clarification from their command center. He kept moving. The docking bay was 2 more levels down and halfway across the station. Every time he thought he'd found a clear path, more security teams would appear, forcing him to backtrack and find alternate routes. The maintenance shafts weren't designed for this kind of travel, and Tyler's shoulders screamed in pain from squeezing through tight spaces. Then his tablet buzzed. A message from Pete, 3 words that made Tyler's blood run cold. Lock down all bays. Commander Vrel had figured out their plan. He'd sealed every docking bay on the station, posted guards at every entrance. Nobody was getting on or off any ship until he found the source of the security breach. Tyler emerged from the maintenance shaft into a service corridor near Cargo Bay 7. Through the viewing window, he could see the civilian transport, so close it might as well have been on another planet. Between him and that ship were 20 armed security personnel and sealed blast doors that required command-level authorization to open. He was trapped. Kira began to fuss, sensing Tyler's fear. He tried to calm her, but his own panic was making it impossible to think clearly. All around him, he could hear security teams closing in, following the trail of disturbed maintenance covers and disabled security cameras. Tyler made a split-second decision. If he couldn't reach the transport, if there was no way to smuggle Kira off the station, then he'd do the only thing left. He'd make them see her. He'd make everyone on this station look at what they were really doing. He walked straight into Cargo Bay 7 and waited. Commander Vrel arrived within minutes, flanked by a dozen armed guards. The tall Corthan officer's face twisted with satisfaction when he saw Tyler standing there, holding something wrapped in blankets. "Well," Vrel said coldly. "I thought we had smugglers. Instead, we have something much more interesting." Tyler pulled back the blanket, revealing Kira's face. Her skin flickered nervously between purple and gray. The guards raised their weapons instinctively, trained to see Vecchia as threats even when they were barely 3 months old. "Her name is Kira," Tyler said, his voice carrying across the bay. "She's a baby. She's dying without proper care. And your regulations say she doesn't deserve to live." Vrel's expression didn't change. "Station protocol is clear regarding Vecchia presence. You will surrender the contraband immediately." "She's not contraband. She's a child. It is a security threat and will be removed from this station." Vrel gestured to his guards. "Take it." That's when something remarkable happened. From every entrance to the cargo bay, people began to appear. Not security forces. Workers. Janitors in their maintenance uniforms. Cooks still wearing their aprons. Medical technicians. Engineers. Cargo handlers. They came from everywhere, abandoning their posts, and they simply stood there in silence. Gorth was the first to reach Tyler's side, his massive form positioning itself between the guards and the human holding a baby. Then Beth appeared, then Roy, then Dash. One by one, the members of the network revealed themselves. But they weren't alone. Other workers were coming too, people Tyler had never met, people who'd heard about what was happening and decided they couldn't stay silent anymore. Within minutes, over 200 station personnel filled Cargo Bay 7. They didn't say anything. They didn't threaten anyone. They just stood there, a wall of bodies between Commander Vrel and the baby he wanted to kill. Commander Vrel stood frozen, his hand hovering near his weapon. Tyler could see the calculation happening behind those cold eyes. 200 unarmed workers versus a dozen security guards with rifles. The math was simple. Vrel could enforce the regulations. He could order his guards to fire. But that would mean gunning down civilians in full view of the station's diplomatic corps, and even Vrel wasn't that stupid. "You are all in violation of station protocols," Vrel said, his voice sharp with barely contained rage. "Return to your posts immediately or face termination." Nobody moved. The silence in the cargo bay was absolute except for the soft sounds of Kira breathing against Tyler's chest. He looked around at the faces surrounding him. Some he recognized from the network, but most were strangers. A young Threxian woman who worked in hydroponics. An elderly human man from environmental systems. A group of kitchen staff still covered in flour from the morning's baking. They'd all left their jobs, risked everything, just to stand here. "This station doesn't function without us," Gorth said quietly. "You know that better than anyone, Commander." Vrel's jaw clenched. 1 hour. You have 1 hour to disperse before I bring charges against every person in this bay. He turned and left, his security team following reluctantly. The guards kept looking back at the crowd, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. Tyler realized that some of them probably knew people in this group. Maybe their weapons technician was standing here. Maybe the person who repaired their armor. The invisible people who kept everything running. As soon as Vrel was gone, the crowd began to murmur. Tyler felt hands patting his shoulder, voices offering encouragement. An older cook pressed food containers into Beth's hands, supplies for Kira. Someone else handed him a blanket, newer and warmer than the threadbare ones he'd been using. "What happens now?" Tyler asked Gorth. The old supervisor shrugged. "Now we wait and see if we're all unemployed by dinner." The hour passed. Then another. Word spread through the station like fire through dry grass. The workers in Cargo Bay 7 weren't returning to their posts. More kept arriving, curious about what was happening, then staying when they saw Kira in Tyler's arms. By the 4th hour, work had stopped across entire sections of Terminus Station. The garbage collection system shut down first. Trash began piling up in the diplomatic quarters, in the high-end restaurants where council members ate, in the conference rooms where important decisions were made. Then the environmental controls started fluctuating because nobody was monitoring them. Temperature dropped in some sections and spiked in others. Food service ground to a halt. The fancy dining halls that served the station's elite sat empty and dark. By the 6th hour, the diplomatic corps was noticing. They emerged from their comfortable quarters to find corridors filled with uncollected waste, climate control failing, no fresh food being prepared. The people who gave speeches about peace and prosperity were suddenly confronted with the reality of who actually maintained that peace and prosperity. Ambassador Chen, the Galactic Council's senior representative on Terminus, demanded a meeting with Commander Vrel. Tyler heard about it later from Beth, who treated the ambassador's assistant for a headache that morning and still had friends in the medical bay. Apparently, Chen had been furious. Not about the baby. About the disruption to his schedule. "This is unacceptable," Chen had reportedly said. "You assured me this station ran efficiently. I have delegates arriving tomorrow and the facilities are falling apart." Vrel had tried to explain the situation, the unauthorized Vekir infant, the violation of protocols. Chen cut him off. "I don't care about your protocols. I care about getting this station functional again. Fix it." That's when things got interesting. Because Vrel couldn't fix it. He tried ordering people back to work, threatening arrests, promising investigations. Nothing worked. The workers simply stood there, in the cargo bay and in the corridors outside, peaceful and silent and immovable. They weren't demanding anything. They weren't negotiating. They were just refusing to participate in a system that would kill a baby for the crime of being born the wrong species. By the 12th hour, the toilets in the diplomatic section stopped working. That's apparently what finally broke through the bureaucratic indifference. Nothing motivates politicians quite like being trapped in their own filth. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. Tyler watched it on the cargo bay's wall screen, Kira sleeping peacefully in his arms while history happened around them. The council members looked uncomfortable and angry, forced to address an issue they'd been happily ignoring for years. Ambassador Chen spoke first, his face projected large on the screen. The situation on Terminus Station has revealed significant gaps in our post-war protocols. It appears our regulations regarding certain species have created an untenable enforcement environment. Tyler almost laughed. An untenable enforcement environment. That was diplomat speak for our policies are so cruel that decent people won't follow them. The debate lasted for hours. Some council members argued for stronger enforcement. Others pointed out the obvious problem with that approach. You couldn't run a space station by arresting everyone who kept it running. Eventually, they reached a compromise that nobody was happy with but everyone could live with. Commander Vrel was ordered to stand down. Tyler was granted temporary guardianship of Kira pending a full review of refugee policies. The workers were guaranteed no retaliation for the work stoppage. It wasn't everything, but it was something. It was a crack in the wall. When Vrel appeared on the screen to make the official announcement, his face looked like he'd swallowed broken glass. By order of the Galactic Council, the Vecchia infant currently in unauthorized custody will remain on Terminus Station under supervised care. All personnel are ordered to return to their duties immediately. The crowd in the cargo bay erupted in cheers. People hugged each other, laughed, cried. Tyler just held Kira closer and tried to process what had just happened. They'd won. Against all odds, against regulations and military commanders and the entire weight of galactic bureaucracy, they'd actually won. But the real victory came 6 months later. The Galactic Council passed the Terminus Accord, a sweeping reform of post-war refugee policies. War orphans would be protected regardless of species. Workers' rights would be formally recognized. Stations would be required to provide basic services to all beings, not just the politically convenient ones. Tyler still worked as a janitor. He liked the job, liked keeping things clean and functional. But now Kira went with him sometimes, riding in a carrier on his back, watching with fascinated eyes as he worked. She was bigger now, healthier, her crystalline skin shimmering with vibrant colors. The station's children had adopted her as one of their own. Human kids, Threxian kids, Siltari kids, all playing together in the recreation areas. Other families started arriving too. Vecchia refugees who'd heard about Terminus Station, about the place where one human janitor had refused to let a baby die. They came seeking sanctuary and found a community that had learned something important. That compassion wasn't something you could regulate away. That the measure of a civilization wasn't found in its laws or its weapons or its treaties, but in how it treated the weakest among them. Gorth retired a hero, though he grumbled about the attention. Beth got promoted to chief medical officer. The network dissolved because it wasn't needed anymore, though its members stayed close, bound by what they'd done together. Sometimes Tyler would see Commander Vrel in the corridors. The man never acknowledged him, but Tyler caught him watching Kira once, a strange expression on his face. Maybe regret. Maybe just confusion about how everything had changed so quickly. One night, Tyler sat in his quarters with Kira sleeping in her proper crib now, not a makeshift nest of blankets. He thought about that moment in the abandoned room when he'd found her dying and alone. How easy it would have been to walk away. How that single choice to stay had somehow rippled outward, changing everything. Kira stirred, reaching out with one small hand. Tyler took it gently, marveling at how something so fragile had proven so powerful. She hadn't done anything special. She'd just existed, and that existence had forced people to choose what kind of universe they wanted to live in. Outside his window, Terminus Station glowed against the stars, home to thousands of beings from hundreds of worlds. Imperfect and messy and still figuring things out. But better than it had been. Better than it might have been if one tired janitor hadn't heard a baby crying in the dark. Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.